Okay, this is episode 8 of the Ding Fu podcast. We're on a roll lately, just pumping out new episodes, right? I got my co host Tony here. How's it going?
I'm doing good. Excited to be back.
Sweet. Yeah, so today we want to get together and discuss the topic of AI, specifically AI when it comes to advancements in the field and what it means for different industries as a whole, right? Um, So we can just jump right into it. I think one of the most common debates about AI is how it'll replace a lot of jobs that, specifically in manufacturing or in the service industry, jobs that can seemingly be easily automated by robots for cheaper, oftentimes, than human counterparts and probably more efficient. And the debate against that is a lot of people will be put out of jobs and not make any income and be unable to afford the cost of living in the United States or wherever, right? And the pushback against that, the solution, so to speak, is UBI, right? Universal Basic Income. It's an idea that's been around that started getting popularized recently by Andrew Yang. Um, so yeah, let's just get into this. Like, what are your thoughts on the whole AI versus the workforce debate, and do you think UBI is the answer to that?
Wow, that's such a broad question.
I mean, it is, but I think it's the most low hanging fruit when it comes to the AI debate. It's
Yeah, I think one thing I'll touch on like that you kind of mentioned at the beginning is like you kind of put AI and robotics together. I would say that it's good to separate those things out
that's
because
fair.
because robotics is more about like I would say fine motor skills, right? And
Mm-hmm.
AI is more about like cognitive skills, right? So I would say those are very different things. When you talk about, I guess, like AI automation and replacement of jobs, um, yeah, it's probably going to be sector specific. Um, and frankly, I think I'm probably less worried and like I think I buy into the hype a little bit less than I used to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think it's going to be really slow adoption. Like like when I first went to university, right? I think 2010, 10 years ago, they were talking about how like self-driving cars were going to be ubiquitous by now, right? By 2020, right? And that hasn't happened.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think it's gonna be pretty slow. Uh, and and so like things like for example uh like replacing cashiers, for example, at McDonald's with a self-ordering kiosk, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's not so much AI, I'd say. Like that's a very low cognitive skill work, right? That's literally just taking orders, right? It does not do any interpretation. In fact, the person pressing the buttons has to do their own interpretation first, right?
Yeah.
Know which ones to press on.
So that's not what
That's
I was referring to when it came to the
oh,
service
okay.
industry. So there were some. I don't have the exact links to this, but I believe McDonald's and some other fast food restaurants started pilot testing some locations that were fully um, automated, fully run by robots. There was basically no real person. Like all the food was being produced by robots as well as alongside the order taking. So that's kind of what I had in mind when I was referring to AI in that industry. I
Yeah.
totally
So,
agree. The ordering kiosk, that's not really AI, but it is. I guess it is similar in the vein of using computers or technology to replace the job of humans, but it's not specifically in the bucket of AI, so to speak. Yeah.
yeah, that's like a communication device, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of just communicating your orders to the computer.
Yeah,
And
but I
I would
think
say the
producing the
food
food
preparation part is
is
robotic, right?
robotics. Yes.
I wouldn't really say that's AI either, because I
No.
don't think that really takes much cognitive skill as much as it is like automated assembly line.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think just the topic, we can get to the AI specifics, the semantics later, but I think the debate in general when it comes to AI is yes, there is a separation of robotics is distinct from AI, and the applications of how we use them is very different. Um, but I think when it comes to the general public, the idea of advancements in AI often is associated with this risk of job replacement, of low level entry jobs being replaced by robots. So that's why I wanted to start on this topic.
Yeah, like can you do you know of like any specific examples that people bring up?
Yeah,
If
just
so, yeah.
well, basically, I think what I what I said is the specific examples.
Okay, fair
Yeah.
enough.
Um, I mean, we can talk about the AI side. I think that's a whole nother topic that's we can talk about later in the podcast. I just wanted to hear your thoughts on this in general, but we can also move
Automation and
on.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so like I would say I'm a big fan of Andrew Yang, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I I think the whole idea around automation and the need for universal basic income, I totally agree with. I'm not sure if right now is the time or later on. Like like back when he was running for president, right? Like they were giving out numbers of like estimates of how much it would cost per year, right? And it was something pretty high, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how many people will qualify if you need to be a citizen in the US, but like the US has a population of around 300 million, right? If you multiply that by $1,000 a month, that'd be $300 billion a month, right? Multiply
Yeah.
that by 12 months in a year, you're getting to around like $3 trillion a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So like do we actually have enough productivity to be taxed to generate that? I guess is a different question. Although aren't they already doing that in the US with all these stimulus? Like isn't it getting to like $3 trillion or more now?
It is, although people will argue that the bulk of the money is not going to the citizens, but rather corporations. Uh,
Like it's juicing up the stock market.
yeah, kind of. I think there's several factors juicing up the stock market. Obviously, quantitative easing is a big part of it. Um, and yeah, like I don't really know if it's true, but I think people will have you believe that these stimulus checks are helping out, like bail out these companies essentially. A lot of these companies will use the money to issue, like do stock buyback to artificially increase their own stock price, if that makes sense. Um, and then yeah, that there's an argument that that's driving up the stock market.
Right. I
Uh,
guess we're veering a little bit off topic,
yeah,
but yeah, so I guess I would say that right now I don't know if we have enough AI and
for sure, for sure.
enough like I guess profit or productivity or whatever being generated from that to
Hmm.
construct the UBI. But I totally agree that it should happen at some point.
It's definitely, I think, too soon for it, and whoever advocates for that to happen right now probably isn't working. Which is wants a free $1,000 check a month. Let's be honest.
I know a friend who's like that.
Yeah,
UBI, please.
UBI.
Um, yeah, okay. So going back to AI, so where do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, so we can branch back into, I guess, the more interesting aspects of AI, the cognitive side, right? The theoretical potential side.
So you said that you don't really work on AI. So what's your understanding of like AI and how it works? Do you interact with it at all at work? Because I mean, you do work on
So
Alexa.
I know the components. Like I can tell you what happens when you speak to your device, right? You generate a voice request, right? An audio file, right? This audio file goes sent to our backend cloud server. It gets analyzed by NLU, natural language understanding, right? And um, ASR, audio something recognition, right? I don't remember the
Okay.
exact um,
I can search it
acronym.
up. You keep talking.
Yeah, so um, So these components are what. So first off, it takes what you say and it translates it into text, right? And analyzes the voice bits and translates into text. So that's the ASR part. That's the recognition of what you're saying and converting into text. The next is NLU, natural language understanding, is when you take the string of text and you try to understand the meaning, the intent behind your words, right? So I've taken like AI courses that I guess break down how NLU works. I don't know if you have touched on this topic, but a rough outline of it is essentially you can break down any sentence into a tree, right? Of and I don't remember the technical terms, but you have like your pronouns, you have your verbs, you have your nouns, and this is going back to English class theory actually, but you can construct any sentence made of a certain number of trees of like an infinite recursive number of like nouns followed by verb, like pronouns, whatever, right? But basically, NLU is taking that text file that we've generated and analyzing it and basically figuring out the intent behind it, right? So, for example, you say, Alexa, turn on the lights in the bedroom, right? It's going to figure out the intent was you want to turn on the lights. Location is in your bedroom, and it's going to map to your account, and it's going to say, hey, we expect to find smart light devices connected to your account, and we found like, let's say, six light devices. There's like two in your living room, one in your bathroom, blah blah blah. He wants the ones in the bedroom turned on, and then it maps to that. So that's an example of how AI is used to understand like what you say and process that request, right? And this is the same behavior that any smart home device behaves. This is how Google Homes work. This is how Siri works, right? Um, and the AI part of the NLU is taking enough sentences, right, and uh, being able to more accurately predict or being able to more accurately understand what you're trying to say by just um, improving its understanding through the use of more training data, right? It's going to be able to more accurately like choose the branches that map to what your intent actually is over time. And so
So,
that's the AI aspect of it.
so how many tasks can Alexa do like that?
How
So
many
first you have to
tasks?
like you have to be able to define the tasks first, right? So like for example, turning on the lights, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then do the training, right? That's how I'm imagining this, right? Or did they somehow manage to from the text in the during the training phase from just like text and
Oh yeah.
emerge
Um,
certain like tasks intent?
yeah, definitely the second part. If you think about it, you don't really need a feature in place for Alexa to understand what it means because the latter is already exists as the English language. Does that make sense? Your training data, your training set, and your labels come from the entire English language. It doesn't come from the available set of Alexa features currently present. Like we can define an intent for Alexa to turn on your car and pull up to driveway. This technology doesn't exist yet, right? We don't have smart cars that listen to your voice commands, but eventually in the future we might. And you can understand the intent that I'm telling you, even though this technology doesn't exist yet. And we can train Alexa to understand that too. We just haven't given it that feature yet, you know? So we can give Alexa a voice request that says, hey, turn on the car, pull up to the driveway in 5 minutes. Alexa can process that request and generate. Um, so in the back end, you can think of this as an object that we defined that gives you the specifications of what this voice request entails, right? The object contains the intent, the user, the location, the whatever metadata we need to define this request, right? And so we can have this object, and when we send it back to the backend server, it's going to say this object, this object maps to a request that wants to turn on the car. Oh, error! We don't have a feature that supports that. But one day we can add that feature very easily, and that request without changing can suddenly be processed. Does that make sense?
Yeah, cool. I wasn't aware that there was already like a trained model out there for detecting intent. So I thought that you guys had to like define the features, like define the tasks first, and then be able to train it that way. But I see what you mean. Like that corpus and that data set kind of is already available, and then from there you
Exactly.
just map it out onto the tasks that's
And
available.
if you're wondering where that data set comes from,
Is that open source? Like, is that like an open data set that exists somewhere?
so yeah, that's the thing is I don't know. It could entirely be open source. It could be Amazon's own generated data set. I wouldn't be surprised if all of these big tech companies have a shit ton of just raw data when it comes to not just voice, but like pictures, right? Text, like anything that can be useful to feed to a neural network.
Yeah, and I'm wondering like
Maybe they
how.
buy it off of Google, even, you know? That's entirely
Yeah,
possible.
yeah, I'm wondering like how they label these things.
Yeah, but for what is worth, Google, Microsoft, maybe Apple as well, uh, and I think also Amazon. Yeah, they actually provide open source APIs for natural language understanding. So you can create your own AI bots pretty easily just by using like Google's computer vision or Microsoft's. I think it's also called computer vision. And in fact, I actually did that for one of my hackathons back in university, and yeah, so it's pretty easy to set up. The
Oh,
technology,
nice.
yeah, it's definitely out there. So even though you don't have access to the raw training data, you can see how it wouldn't be too difficult to just create a bot that can understand what you're trying to say.
Yeah, I'll play around with that sometime.
Yeah, I can actually link you afterwards. The Google one that we used. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. It's been a while since I've sort of touched AI stuff, honestly. It's
Mm-hmm.
been like 2 years, right, ever since med school started. So I'm kind of just getting back into it, and there's like a lot of stuff I don't know, and like a lot of the new
Oh
data sets
yeah,
that have been constructed.
there's definitely a lot of stuff I don't know, but it's just a lot of cool stuff you can try it on your own. I think, which is nice. But yeah,
Cool.
so yeah, there's definitely a lot of teams in Alexa involved in improving the voice models of Alexa, right? In fact, that's base. That's actually one of our orgs. Like our org is responsible for that stuff. It's just all of those teams are in the data science fields, and they're not in Seattle. They're either in they're actually in California, and then some of them are in Chennai, India, I think. So that's why I don't have much interaction with them. But my intern project actually to to upsell. It was basically a feature where you would ask users to provide their own labels to their own to their own data. Essentially, it basically we were trying to improve the voice recognition models, and so we would add a question to Alexa to like append a question that would sometimes appear after certain interactions, where it'd be like, by the way, I think I'm speaking to Tony. Is that right? And based on your answer, we would label the result and use that data to try to improve the training model. So that was actually my intern project. It never made it to prod because that was huge privacy and legal concerns. But it was cool enough to get me rehired. So, you know.
Oh, that's interesting. So, what was the privacy problem? Like it was asking for information that the user did not want to provide.
So just imagine that you are using your device, right? And some users, like, to be able to use this feature, you would have had to enroll a voice profile with Alexa. But some users might not remember having done that. So imagine you're using a device and all of a sudden it's asking you, by the way, is this Tony? It can come
And
off.
what is your social security
Yeah,
number?
it can definitely come off as creepy to some users. And if you read those news articles that appear um, regarding these smart home devices being creepy, a lot of times it's like an intended feature that the customer just totally misunderstood, and then news media blows it up as like, oh, this is like, your Alexa is spying on you, it's recording your conversations, blah blah blah. So yeah, there's always huge pushbacks from legal and privacy when it comes to making sure the customer experience is as clear and unambiguous as it can be.
And quite frankly, you're asking them to do basically free labor for you.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, which is why it was entirely an intern project. It's a very proof of concept thing, you know. Yeah.
Cool, cool. If that ever happens, I guess I know who to blame.
It's funny because they reused that same project for another intern next year, like literally the same project. So you could just tell, like, they come up with like a few projects that they know will never launch into production, but it's like good enough for to give throw at an intern.
And they pay you for this?
Yeah, hell yeah, they pay you for
To
this.
redo the same work every time? Or
It's
do they?
pretty. Yeah, that's the funny part is that's not very efficient with your money, right? But ultimately, the goal of the intern project is to give the team an accurate assessment of the intern because hiring a good intern is a lot more cost effective than hiring an external hire, just because the ramp up time is a lot faster. They already know the team, they know the systems, and you have a lot more data on them than someone that you only interviewed for a few rounds with, right? You worked with them for 12 weeks versus like 4 rounds of interviews. But yeah.
So it sounds like you do have experience working with some AI stuff. So that's really cool.
I mean, I wouldn't say this is AI stuff directly, right? Because everything I touched was through backend Java, right? I was really just adding a component for the user to provide some input for some data that we can use later. Um,
So it really is just data collection,
it
when
really is
you're
just data collection and triaging, right? Like the closest thing I did to what a data scientist would do was write a SQL query to extract the results of my code, basically, right? So I wouldn't consider that any AI work, so to speak.
although to be fair, I feel like a lot of data scientists
That
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 is
is what they do.
true.
Yeah, but I don't like interpret the data. I don't play like I don't analyze the results of it, whatever. And yeah, it was more so just to finish my project end to end.
Okay, cool, cool. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
but yeah,
So, hmm, yeah, so where do we go from here? I guess
I would
what
say
an inside look. Can you give me an
mhm,
inside look to like,
an inside
you
look.
know, although I guess you don't know that much, but where do you think AI is going in big tech?
In big tech. Yeah, so I think more so big data is the important part, um, more so than AI, right? Big data is what enables AI and machine learning to do the things that big tech wants it to do. Let's think about it from the profitability aspect, right? Ultimately, uh, innovation, I think, a lot of times is driven by profit, right? If there's money to be made in a field, chances are you're going to see a lot of advancements in that field. Whereas if it's a field that is very cool, but we don't see a lot of like short term profit being made from it, a lot of times innovation will be stalled, right? So I think that is one reason why you don't see as many advancements in AI is because the cost right now does not justify the potential like revenue you can get from it, at least in the short term, right? Um, but what is very cost effective is ads, right? Ads is basically the most cost effective thing that you can get. Period. So what enables great profit from ads is targeted personalized ads, right? This is the genius idea that Google and Facebook came up with that enabled them to become the giants they are today, right? Um, and what enables that ultimately is big data. So being able to collect your personal data, all the fuss about Google and Facebook tracking your personal data and selling it to people. Let's get one thing clear first of all. It's not like companies specifically know there's a Jack Ding or Tony Fu that's like 28 years old male, like lives in whatever
Whoa, whoa,
city.
whoa, whoa, whoa! Too much information.
Redacted, redacted, um, etc., etc. Right. The point is, you become part of an aggregate group that gets labeled for certain things. Like you become a part of a group that's like interests include, AI, whatever, like likely to buy, blah blah blah, like how much you're likely to spend, whatever. And then they found that ads targeting you specifically based on these interests proved to be particularly engaging, right? Versus just generic blanket targeted ads or blanketly sent ads. So that's the juicy part of machine learning right now, of AI, is being able to personalize your experience on a platform. That's where things are heading towards, right? That's actually what my org is trying to work on. Our org is actually called identity and personalization, and our goal is to personalize the experience of the user on their Alexa device based on their preferences, based on their prior usage, right? And I think I see that trend. That will be the trend that's going to take over, like slowly in the future, is slowly more and more personalization based on your own usage, right? the big the big revolution in social media came with the feed, with your personal feed, right? Facebook created this thing where everybody's experience on Facebook, on Instagram is different based on what they're subscribed to, based on their likes and wants and interests. And the algorithm is based on a number of factors, right? It's based on who you follow, it's based on what you see, like what you like, what you comment on. And it's highly effective, it's highly addicting, right? Because it ends up being that everybody gets a unique experience out of it, and you can literally be in your own bubble surrounded by things you're only interested in. And it's like a feedback loop where the more you look at, the more you're diving down that rabbit hole of things that you're only interested in. And so that's what I see happening is and how AI will be used is just improvements in the feed algorithm to provide you the most tailored experience for yourself, to be as addicting for you as it can be. That's the ultimate goal. And I think that's also why TikTok became such a success, is their feed and recommendation system is so amazing. It really pinpoints your, like, what you want to see really quickly. um, that's why my feed is full of girls dancing and no, I'm just kidding. That's a few of my friends. Not gonna name any names, but but yeah, that's my thoughts on where that's headed in the short term, I would say.
I have an example of a um, specific, I guess, like AI model that was used to do a specific task in this. Like, so, I think some obvious ones maybe like clustering of users, right?
Yes.
Another one might be, uh, I guess, classification of a user into a predetermined group.
Yep.
Yeah, is that kind of the bread and butter of what they're doing, or are there like some special techniques that I'm guessing if there's special techniques we won't know, but
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not as familiar with the technical aspects, but I think you're right in terms of big picture. That's what they're trying to improve on, is the labeling of a customer, of a user, right? In terms of interests. From the perspective of TikTok, when a new user joins, it's going to throw at them a few different kinds of videos, and then based on how much they view like a certain video, if they liked it, if they watched it a lot, if they commented, if they clicked into that page, it's going to quickly weigh. It's going to assign scores and values on each of the different what's the word, categories, right, of videos, and it's going to try to pinpoint for that user as quickly as possible what their interests are. So I think, like, from a new user perspective, um, the first like 10 or so videos, depending on what you're like, how you interact with them, will greatly affect what you see for the rest of your feed, right? And so that initial part, that initial discovery, a labeling of the user, I think that's where the money is to be made. Is like how quickly you can assess this user's interest, how quickly you can label them accurately, and give them the content that they need to see to stay engaged on your platform to get them hooked. You know,
And that's so scary, right? Because
that is
that
extremely scary. Yeah,
you are basically like they come in and then you're just like shoving them down this rabbit hole, right? You're just
exactly,
putting them into
exactly.
that hole, like that's
And
you.
TikTok is frighteningly good at this aspect. They are really, really good at getting you hooked within those first 10 or so videos. It is. That's what
I
makes them
see.
so
So this is
successful.
it's funny because like a few years ago, back when I was really into AI and I was thinking maybe I'll work in this field, one of the reasons I kind of got turned off by it, I forgot who said this, but I heard someone say basically that the brightest minds in AI are just being paid right now mass amounts of money to get you to click on ads. I was like, oh, that doesn't, like AI seems like it has so much potential, but if this is what it's being used for, maybe this isn't what I
Right.
want
Yeah, so
to do.
you can kind of see though like why it comes out this way, right? It's because ultimately where's the money to be made? It's from getting you to click on ads.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily just money to be made, but it's really the cost benefit analysis, right? We're so
Sure.
like the profit you can gain for very low cost, like you mentioned. This is a very
Yes.
low cost thing you can do, right?
Yes.
You're not really manipulating anything in the real world, right? Which would
Yeah.
take a lot more technical expertise. You're just manipulating things digitally, right? Which is very easy to do
True.
and not very costly, and also doesn't have a lot of what you can say huge consequence, right?
Mhm.
Like someone clicks on something is very different from your self-driving car driving to a ditch,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So yeah, I can totally see why this is where it's begun. And uh, you know, do you think big tech will pivot to something else, or like this is kind of
Oh, sure. I think that like a lot of focus is here because you know this is where the like you said it's a low hanging fruit in terms of cost effectiveness. But that doesn't mean that it's going to stifle innovation completely in other areas, especially when it comes to big tech. Like these companies love to be involved in everything, right? Especially Amazon. Like their goal is to just be in so many different sectors, and to basically use AWS um, as fuel for them to like rapidly expand into other sectors and you know expand at a loss that's being funded by AWS, so to speak. So that's a bit off topic, but like one thing I'm thinking about is self-driving cars, right? Like Google, Uber, Lyft, they're all investing in this technology because they see the long-term potential, right? Especially Uber and Lyft, like they see the attractiveness in not relying on the drivers, eliminating drivers as a whole from their business model, right? And that will be prove huge in the long term, and it's why they're willing to take losses right now to try to accomplish that. Um,
so let's talk about self-driving cars actually, because this is one of the things that's been talked about so much, right? And I
yes.
think there were so many promises, so many forecasts that came and went that never came true,
Mm-hmm.
and it still seems like we're quite far away. Like we always seem to be like 2 years away.
Yep. Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Um, so do you think that's gonna happen anytime soon? Like, what are your thoughts on that field?
Yeah. So similar to you, I think it was something that I almost expected would have happened by now, and to be honest, yeah, I don't really know why we've basically been stagnating for the past few years. Because you always hear about how like we're so close, and you hear about how like you know Google and Tesla are already like using self-driving cars on the road, and despite that like we don't see anything coming out um, for production, right? I
The technology is
imagine.
there already.
Sorry.
Do you think the technology is already there?
Oh, the technology is there, yeah.
Like, so I think so. I haven't done too much reading into this, but I think I read somewhere that basically the total amount of distance driven by self-driving cars so far is still not equal to a single person's lifetime driving yet.
Hmm.
And so they do not have enough of a record to say that this is safe yet, basically. Like you just
Yeah, so I mean,
drive
the
it.
technology is there. It's just, is it safe? I think is the big question, right? And
Oh, okay.
I think you're right. Is like we need to see just more data, and even when the technology is ready, public opinion is going to take a little time to shift, right? I think anytime there's going to be any accidents on the road, which has happened already, right? I think there's been incidents where I know Tesla has some variation of self-driving for sure, right? That's definitely already in place because you see like there's news articles of the Tesla auto drive feature like not working, like running into
I
a
think it's like highway
it's a
driving.
specific highway thing, right? Okay.
You're still supposed to be paying attention. Like it's not supposed to take over.
Right,
It's more
right.
cruise control almost.
Okay, okay. Yeah, so in that case, like you can see that we're kind of implementing like some hybrid solutions of self-driving, right? So I imagine that eventually in the near future, we should be seeing a push for full automated driving, but I do think there's going to be public resistance to it um, for a little bit. Like we're going to need to see enough data to prove that it is as safe or safer than manual driving.
Yeah, and I guess another thing is like I don't know how well they've been able to deal with like non-ideal driving conditions, right? Like so what happens if there's a lot of rain? What happens if there's snow? What happens if they're off-road? What happens, if there's poor lighting and all those things?
Hmm.
I don't know if that's all been figured out yet, to be honest. Or like what if there's construction? What if there's like random weird shit going on?
Right, right, yeah. So I think that yeah, that'll come back to just we need more data, we need more sample size, we need to see uh, how it performs in different conditions, and once it reaches an acceptable standard, um, then I think we'll start seeing it being more commonly used.
Yeah, and I want to say that dealing with edge cases is very different from dealing with a well-structured problem, right?
Oh yeah.
So, like, let's say it takes 10 years to get to the point where you can have really good, reliable self-driving on like good road conditions. It might literally take another 20 years then for it to be able to drive, in non-ideal conditions,
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
And to
Um,
be able to test those things is even more difficult because those are more rare conditions to happen.
mhm.
Like, and every construction site, every like road accident that you run into is going to look different,
Yeah,
right? So I think it's going to be really, really difficult to train that for AI to do.
you're right. Yeah.
Um, yes, and so I guess from that perspective, I'm not sure the technology truly is ready.
Hmm.
Um, and it will probably have to be hybrid. And the problem is, if it's hybrid, then what's the point, right? If you still have to pay attention to the road, right? And this costs so much more money to develop,
Hmm.
right? And the product might cost more money. Then what's the point,
Yeah,
right?
that's
You're
true.
not really saving yourself any money or time or effort in that case, right?
That's true.
Um,
It comes back to the cost effectiveness. It needs to be worth the effort of investing in, right? For this innovation to occur. So, for example, um, one simple innovation that came to cars that assists you with driving is um, just adding more mirrors, right? Like add like a mirror for when you reverse, and some cars even have enough mirrors that you could recreate like a surround image of your car when you're parking. These things were very easy to implement, and the benefit was really great for drivers, right? So going back to this, yeah, potential idea of hybrid AI, it's not so easy to implement, and the benefit might be pretty marginal compared to what we achieve just by adding a few mirrors, to the car. So, or cameras, I guess, not mirrors, but yeah. So I think the there's there's gonna need to give something has to give in terms of either the cost of investing in this has to reduce, or we have to see some more potential benefit
yeah,
from
like from a, I guess a technology company point of view. like so from the consumer's point of view, right? If it costs more money and you still have to keep an eye out, then this shit's worthless,
Yeah.
basically, right?
Yeah.
From the technologist, from the company point of view, I guess you're thinking if this has to be a very long term play, right? Like where you're probably going to be sinking money to this for a very long time, but once
Mhm.
you're able to get it done and do it well to the point where the consumer does not need to keep an eye on the road anymore, then you can basically capture the entire market share,
Yeah.
right? And I guess that's the payoff, but it's going to be a really long time before that payoff comes.
Exactly, exactly. So you can imagine like Uber and Lyft have incentive to do this because it directly benefits their business model, right? If they achieve this, Google wants to do this because they're bored as hell and they have the most training data when it comes to anything. So they just have a natural advantage when it comes to anything like AI related. They have a head start essentially, and that's why I believe Google is the most ahead when it comes to self-driving cars currently. Um, I don't have the facts to verify, but I know that Google is the most thought after. um,
Fair enough.
but yeah,
Yeah, I guess the way we're examining in this is sort of like, at the very basic level, you need the data. At the next level, you need this to financially make
you need the
sense.
incentive. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and I think the next level is sort of the social acceptance and adoption part.
right.
And I see that being very difficult.
Hmm.
So,
So all in
you know,
all, there's a lot of barriers. I think.
yeah, I've heard a lot of people talk about how at one point, it's going to be illegal to drive on your own because it's unsafe, right?
Hmm.
Um, and that might well be true, but I think there's also the question of risk stratification. So meaning that let's say self-driving cars become just a little bit safer than individual driving. Okay. But what if you were a safe driver, right? What if you were safer than the average? Because that in that case they'll be comparing to the average, right?
Yeah.
And as well, self-driving cars will make mistakes and they'll make different mistakes to humans. And I think that would be hard pill to swallow, meaning that, you know, human driving mistakes might in some ways be very predictable. It might be caused by fatigue, being impaired like through like substances, or like a blind spot or whatever, right? Or distracted driving, whatever. An AI mistake might on the surface seem incomprehensible,
True.
right? It might literally happen. It might be, let's say, 1 in a billion chance, but it might be something really stupid.
Yeah.
Like it just straight up just runs a person over,
Yep.
right? When they see it perfectly.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so if you were a normal person, you'd be like, okay, well, like I clearly wouldn't make that mistake. So you're trading off a certain set of mistakes for another certain set of mistakes.
You're right. Yeah.
And you think, is that acceptable, right? Because the human mistakes are avoidable, right? If avoidable in the sense that, like, let's say you weren't distracted, if you weren't impaired, right? It's avoidable. But if the AI starts making these sort of really blatant mistakes, you would think, well, if drivers were just, not drinking, if drivers were not texting while driving and stuff, then they wouldn't have made that mistake.
Hmm.
And then you would say that is the AI truly better, right?
Yeah.
So I
That's a
think that's
great
also
point.
going to be, I think that's going to be a huge issue.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like this risk stratification thing, we kind of see in insurance already, right? So, um, for example, like insurance is in a way like kind of like is risk stratification based on categories, right? It's very similar to AI in that way. And so
Yeah.
you you would treat everyone of the same category the same. You average them out, right? But you can always argue that you are a safe driver compared to the average blog group you belong to,
Yeah.
right? And I think, if you were put it like that, I think a lot of people would be uncomfortable being judged in that way where things are averaged out. I guess this is getting a little bit off topic, but yeah, like I think that points to something about the understanding of statistics, right? Something to the understanding of like population averages and seeing how it really isn't a prediction based on yourself, but a prediction based on some features of you but that you are more nuanced and there are error bars that doesn't capture. Um,
Yeah, um, I think it is a really good point, especially what you brought up regarding the AI self-driving cars are going to make a different set of mistakes that humans at first are not going to be able to rationalize. They're going to look at these mistakes and they're going to be like, wait, this is stupid. Like, no human would make this kind of mistake, right? Like, AI is dumb. When in fact, if you compare the numbers, probably the AI mistakes will occur less than the human ones. But to the human mind, like, we don't see things from a solely objective perspective. We're gonna see like a car just blatantly run over someone or like run a red light, right, and do something really dumb, and we're gonna be like, there's no way we should be using this, right? Like, you try arguing with someone who sees a video of an AI doing the dumb shit and present them like the numbers, like, oh, in fact, it's like 0.1% versus 1.3% in terms of human errors, therefore AI is still better. It's hard to present that argument. You have to convince the public, a whole, like, not just through stats but like through the eye test as well, I think.
and if you're looking at that data, right? Let's say it shows the AI makes this mistake 1 in a million times, let's say, right? And it's something really stupid where like just it just like runs a red light or something.
Yeah.
And then you say that, oh, human make mistakes, let's say 1 in 10,000 times, right? But you can justify why they made that mistake,
Yeah.
right? And then I think if you were as a person, you would say, well, I would have been able to prevent that mistake that the AI made, right? And that person might also say, I can also prevent the mistakes that those other humans made, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they would think that me as an individual would have done better than the average.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's going to be an issue. And that might be something that people will talk about years from now when we start making decisions about AI and whether or not to adopt self-driving cars.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's an interesting debate that you brought up about how potentially in the future, driving by yourself will be banned, will be outlawed. um, yeah, I do think that's when that issue of getting averaged out based on categories would be a problem. I think if they were to roll this out in terms of you can use one or the other or interchangeably, if they could make it seamless like that, there would be less of an issue of people saying like I'm a better driver than this average. Why am I getting labeled here? Because they still have the freedom of driving on their own.
Yeah, not only that, but even if it was a mandatory ban or mandatory adoption, then you could still have the problem of AI killing you as a person.
Sure.
So you might want to, like some people might want to ban AI. Let's say if their kid got killed by AI doing something really
Mm.
stupid, right? I guess what I'm trying to get at is sort of this idea of, in one case, you're putting things outside of your control. You're essentially putting yourself in the lottery. Let's say you just let AI cars drive around and you say, okay, well, there's a 1 in a million chance I will die
Mm-hmm.
due to some really stupid mistake. And that's a well-defined statistic, right? And it might truly be random, right? That's the problem. It's truly random. Um, on the other hand, you might say, okay, I might have, on average, a 1 in 10,000 chance of dying driving on my own, but I am in charge of my own destiny, right? That I might be able to defy the odds, right? And it's really hard to argue with that because in that case, you are taking your destiny. Like the thing is, you yourself making a choice is not really captured in stats,
True.
right? Stats is the average. You cannot say that the average is going to happen to you. And so that becomes a problem of freedom where, like, do we just let everyone roll the dice, right? And basically equal it out, or do you let people take their own risks, right? And they might do better.
Yeah.
They might do worse, they might do better, right?
But you're right. The value of making that choice on your own is not really present in the stats.
Yeah,
And
and
I'm
like
sure a lot of people
you're
would take
to
that choice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's gonna be really interesting. It kind of reminds me of like the whole passive versus active investing too,
Yeah, a
where
little bit. Yeah. There's
you're
a.
taking your own destiny into your own hands, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you can say that these are the odds, but we don't. But this thing that we're doing is not truly stochastic, right? It's not truly random.
Yeah. It's not random. Ape together strong.
It seems random, but you might think that you can make a better decision, right? Whereas if you were just to truly let this up to self-driving cars, then it would, I think, basically be truly random unless you can fully comprehend why it's making those mistakes, right?
Yeah, you're right.
So,
You're right.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a good. I think that's a good way to wrap up the self-driving car topic of this. Um, yeah, I think adoption will have a lot of resistance. That last point was something I hadn't considered, but is gonna be a pretty big one, I think. I could see a
Yeah.
lot of people saying, yeah, like, why would I trust? Like, I've been driving myself for 30 years, right? Like, why would I suddenly start trusting some machine? And here's an interesting thought. Like, do you think when AI, if and when AI becomes more commonplace, like not just self-driving cars, but let's say we see a lot of AI present, like smart home technology is more prevalent. Maybe we even have them in the form of actual like cyborg slash robot forms, right? And like iRobot, for example. Um, you think we're going to see racism towards AI? Like AI, like not in my neighborhood. We
That's
prefer synthezoids, synthetic
that's in,
beings.
that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, this was a topic I think when I was getting to AI about how long it's been, like 7, 8 years ago.
Hmm.
This was a topic people were talking about, right? Which was like AI rights and stuff.
Right.
And in a way, I think they're kind of jumping the gun.
They're
Like in a
definitely
way,
jumping
it's
the gun in that sense.
yeah, it's kind of good to think about it, but I mean, it's gonna be so long before that truly is a thing.
I was
And
more thinking like there's going to be a blanket a blanket resistance towards all things I think for a little while. Um,
there might be,
and I think
yeah.
in the U.S. it would be politically driven, if I'm being honest.
Hmm. Yeah, like I guess going back to that thing that I was talking about how you make a choice versus someone else making the choice for you, right? And it becoming truly statistical, then I can see a resistance towards that, right? Where you would say, I want to do this thing myself, right? I want to have control over it. I want to make the decision. I don't want someone else to make the decision for me, right? That might be part of the drive against AI. And I guess there could be the drive against AI where people would say like these are abominations,
Hmm.
right? This is not natural. I can see that argument coming up as
I
well.
can see that argument coming from a religious perspective, right? Like God did not make these things. These are yeah unnatural creations.
Yeah, I mean, if AI gets to a point where they like fall into the uncanny valley, then like this could be a problem even on the secular society, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean, right? Like so,
Yeah.
so if it's like AI but it becomes creepy, right? It doesn't even have to be a religious thing. If it's just creepy, you're like, yeah, no, this is a bit
Yeah,
strange.
you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Imagine going to your pastor's like, I, I'm in love with the AI. I can't stop having these thoughts.
Yeah,
Forgive me, Father.
that could be a future. It's not something I've had a lot of thought over.
I think it's something to yeah. It's like a fun thing to think about, but I don't think it's something we'll have to consider for a long time.
hmm Yeah, and okay, I guess we can like, play the game of like imagine the future, right? That's like this.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
per your recommendation, I was watching Altered Carbon,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
like I'm a few episodes in, and like they had that
They-
AI hotel guy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
First of all, that's like hella overpowered. Like, why is AI not running the world in this scenario? I don't understand.
Yeah, he's kind of like a Deus Ex Machina in the series. I feel like it's like they use him to get out of some sticky situations, and like when they need information, it's like access the deep web.
Yeah, and like, why is AI like relegated to this like, they call them like the creepy old hotels or
Oh,
whatever, right?
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
why are they relegated to that? Like, AI should be running the world in this
Uh
case.
huh. Yeah, that's a good question. The only reason I can think of is like humans probably saw what their potential was and just limited them to, you know, hotel management or whatever.
Yeah, but how do they do that, right? Like, it
Yeah.
seems like these AIs I don't know. I'm not that far into the series, but it seems like they're capable
I mean,
of
it
manipulating matter,
it's
right?
not
So they
it's not a
control
spoiler to say that like I think ultimately like this is just a neat like cool part of the lore that you don't think too hard about, because if you do, then yeah, it makes sense that AI will be running the world. But I think it's just a cool part of like sci-fi, like the world building of this series is like, oh, you have these like advanced AI that's like characters of their own, but they can't be the main characters because this is a human story.
right. Um, hmm. So I guess actually, sorry to jump around, but
Mm.
before we go into all that, like, crazy imagining the future kind of stuff,
Yeah, yeah.
speculation, like I'll talk a little bit about, so I've been thinking a bit recently about what the future of AI is in medicine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's talk about that.
Um, is because I'm starting to get interested back in AI a little bit more. I was applying to lead the student club in AI, not the one I'm leading right now, but this bigger one
Mm-hmm.
that has a little bit more reach and stuff. And one of the questions they asked was like, what do you imagine the role of AI is in healthcare? And I thought about it for a little while, and here's kind of my thesis for what's going to happen in the near future, I would say. So, which is that we're having digitalization of medical records right now. So you might not be like so you might not be aware of this. You might even be surprised, but like a lot of medical records are not digitized, right? They're on paper charts right now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you,
And
you did tell me that Alberta only recently switched to digital.
yeah, we're still in the middle of that transition. Like we're not even done
I
yet.
see.
And so that might finish, I think, by next year, by the end of next year. And so what's going to happen is that this is going to generate a shit ton of data, right? And it's going to generate data in a way that's manipulatable, right? Meaning that like, paper data is still data, but it's really hard for an AI to deal with that, right? Like it has to first transcribe it and everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really annoying. But if you can program it, if you can type that directly in and store it in the EMR, then it becomes a treasure trove of data. And I think what's going to happen then is that this is the creation of that digital environment for AI to work, right? So what I see, some of the, I think like one way to think about it in terms of like an office visit is that you come in, you talk to your doctor, and the whole thing is being recorded, right? It might not be stored, but it's recorded in the meanwhile, at the very least, just transcribe the conversation, right? So, kind of like what Alexa does, right? So with
Mm-hmm.
the ASR, automatic speech recognition, I think it's going to,
There we go. Speech recognition. That's what it is. Yeah.
yeah, I searched that while you were talking. So you transcribe it, and then you can do NLP on it, right? Natural language processing,
Yeah.
and you might be able to uh, pick out certain things, and then you'll be able to suggest diagnoses, right? You'll be able to suggest treatments. And really, what I see is that it's going to be really hard to replace doctors for a really long time, I think. I think it's going to be hard for AI to do this well enough so that people are comfortable with it being replaced. But it's going to be that hybrid thing for a while. So in that medical record thing, so the transcribed conversation might be able to populate uh, progress notes or visit notes, right, for that encounter. And then from that, it might be able to suggest. So the doctor has to validate at every point, but then it might be able to suggest diagnosis, suggest treatments, and as well, it can uh, suggest articles for you to read on this topic, right? It can suggest clinical practice guidelines on specific diseases. It can suggest referrals or programs within your local area, within your city, right? For you to refer these people to the supports that can help your patients, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, it's really going to be like all the other big tech companies we're seeing, right? Like kind of like how um, the EMR becomes the platform, right? So just kind of like a Google, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it becomes a platform, it's collecting the data and suggesting these out all on a screen. So it's not manipulating anything in reality, right? I think a lot of people have talked about how like, oh, AI is going to take over like surgery, like robo surgery, or AI is going to do um, AI is going to do like replace a radiologist's job, right? I think it's first going to come from the text-based stuff, right? Because that's pretty standard, right? So the problem with like CT scans and whatever MRIs and stuff is that they're not very standardized, right? There are like slight angle shifts. There are like different conditions, like in the real world that affects how that picture is taken,
Mm-hmm.
right? The machine might not be calibrated. There are all this noise that can go in it. But if you're just typing in words,
Mm-hmm.
there aren't that much noise. So I think this is where it's going to start. It's going to revolve around the electronic medical record. That's my
Right.
prediction.
Okay.
And it's going to create that digital environment. It's going to be the platform, just like a Google, Amazon, whatever platform, right? And from there, the AI is going to be able to learn what the doctor does. So, right, if the doctor accepts a certain suggestion or the doctor clicks on a certain article, it's going to record that, right? And it's going to start learning your behavior. And so, in a way, it's going to work very similarly to how big tech firms work right now.
Interesting. Yeah. So you see a lot of the advancements being mostly digital in that sense. Um,
Yes.
do you think that relates back to what we talked about regarding cost effectiveness? Like this is easier and cheaper to implement and makes a bigger impact. So that's why we're going to see it trend towards this way.
Yeah, I think it's the ease of which to do this. Like I think whenever you get to having to do something in the physical world, it becomes that much harder, right? I think that's why Tesla was a much harder thing to create,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
It was because you had to go against, the laws of physics, right? You had to you had to change something in the real world,
Mm-hmm.
right? Changing something in code, I think is easier in a way than
Oh
changing
yeah.
something in the real world,
I
right?
mean, just to be clear, changing something in the real world also comes from the code.
Can you explain that?
Well, in terms of AI,
Oh yeah, in terms of AI, what I mean is like, for example, having to, uh, how do I put it? Having to create a new battery, for example.
okay, fair enough. Yeah.
But also like if your AI being taught to manipulate something in the real world, right? So if you think about it, let's say AI doing surgery, you still have to cut the person open in a certain way, right? Where you have to like go layer by layer,
Mm-hmm.
right? Virtual world, right? Let's say you have a virtual patient, you can manipulate something within the person, right? Without having to go through all the other layers. That's kind of what I'm getting at. You know what I mean?
I think that's an interesting example to use, but I mean, I know what you mean. There's like it's definitely easier to do something digitally. Um,
Hmm.
I think I just meant to clarify that like when we're get to the point of doing something physically, that still comes from improving the code. It still comes from improving uh, the decision tree algorithms, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, that's very interesting because without you having described that to me, I wouldn't have considered that as I think the direction that AI is going to head towards in medicine. But that does make
I
sense.
Yeah, that's just my own prediction. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I think when we hear about AI in medicine, everyone immediately goes to radiology.
Right. So I was gonna ask about yeah, like using AI to so not maybe not even specific to radiology, but just being able to diagnose a patient using AI. Like, do you see any value there?
Yeah. Sorry, I guess to backtrack a little bit. Yeah, I do see the radiology part being part of the EMR
Okay.
component.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess I don't mean that the radiology is something different, but I just think that mm, that how they put it, that the natural language processing thing may be easier first, right? Because it can be done analogously to what's being done at Google and stuff already.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, the image processing, I think it's going to be a little bit different, and I think that's the problem. Like
Mm-hmm.
the creating the suggestion engines, right, for articles, for guidelines, and for referrals and stuff. I think that's all just things analogous to what already exist.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think creating something to diagnose from a CT scan, for example, is something different that has to be created.
That's true. Yeah.
So sorry, what were you getting at? What were you trying to say?
Um, Yeah, I guess just on the topic of like when you said, you saw AI advancing towards the EMR direction. I guess when I think of AI in medicine, I'm thinking like one benefit would be being able to diagnose yourself based on your conditions. If you take a picture, for example, of um, like a weird rash you got or something, uh, and you're able to upload that picture to a database that has a um, good enough algorithm to accurately assess your condition, right? Being able to diagnose yourself without seeing the doctor in person, especially ever since COVID, there's like such a big emphasis on telemedicine, right? So this would greatly accompany that. Like, do you think there's any potential there?
Yeah, the potential is there. I think it's just it's one of the harder pieces. So when I talk about that
Mm-hmm.
EMR thing, I talk about suggesting, like diagnosing stuff. I think that's the hardest part.
I do
If you
think
have a
so too,
diagnosis,
because I
it's
think
pretty it might be
oftentimes
easier.
doctors straight up will misdiagnose patients, right? So
Yeah,
it's already an area that we humans have trouble accurately doing, right? So and machines get their like people are saying, oh, like machine learning is better than humans. They get their fucking learnings from humans, right? Like who do you think tells them what's right or wrong, right?
yeah,
um,
exactly. So I just want to refine my point a little bit. So when I talk about the EMR and suggesting diagnoses and things, yeah, I think the suggesting diagnosis is the hardest part.
hmm
I think the easier part would be recognizing keywords and then using that to suggest treatments, using that
right.
to suggest
That's more
uh,
reliable for sure.
related articles and stuff. And the thing with that is that there isn't as much liability. You could be only right 60% of the time,
Yeah.
right? But you're still helpful. You're still suggesting articles and stuff that could be still helpful, and it doesn't have as much consequences, right?
Right. Right.
Back to what we're talking about consequences in AI and how, if there are high consequences, then it's being a harder field to develop. Whereas if it's like just something like a recommendation engine
Yeah.
that doesn't have a lot of consequences, it's going to be easier to implement to go into adoption.
hmm
So the problem with the CT part is the diagnosis part, is that that's really difficult. I mean, I haven't really looked at this literature for a very long time, but my understanding of it is still whenever we hear, let's say this AI was better than humans at diagnosing X on CT scan or whatever, right? The problem is that if this was a screening tool, right? I think that's reasonable in a way, where you have a definitive yes no. So do you remember Silicon Valley, the show? Like
Yeah.
I haven't watched the entire thing, but I remember this scene, right, where uh, what's the guy's name? The Asian guy,
Jin Yang.
Jin Yang, right? Didn't he create like an AI? And he was like, "Yo, guys, look!" And then he like takes a picture of a pizza, right? And it was like pizza, and they're like, "Oh my God, you're a genius! You made it work!"
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then something
I know
else,
that scene.
and it was like not
Not
pizza.
pizza.
Like, what the fuck? That's fucking useless,
Yeah.
right?
Do you
I
do you
think that
remember the conclusion of that little plot line, by the way?
I don't remember.
So the original it wasn't pizza, it was actually hot dogs. Like he only had
Okay.
enough time to train his model to recognize hot dogs, right? And so they were like, this technology is garbage, like we can't pitch this. And then so it's like the other guy, I forget his name too, the guy who owns the house, the incubator house, like he like basically tosses him aside as a partner. And then he ends up getting bought out because his hot dog algorithm turns out to be super efficient in detecting penises in real time. So he gets like bought out by like Periscope to use like as like their like not safe for work filter for later. And he ends up becoming like a multi-millionaire. It's hilarious.
Yeah, and so what I'm trying to get at with that story
Right, right.
is all these comparisons are around a single diagnosis. The thing is, when you look at a CT scan, you aren't just saying, is this X or not X?
Mhm.
You're asking yourself, is this something within this set of like 1,000, 10,000 different elements, right?
Mhm.
Of different diagnoses. That's what you're asking for. And so in that sense, I think it's not there for to get a diagnosis. Now, if this was built into a clinical pathway for a screening tool, it might have utility. And in fact, I think it has been. So there's something called, I think, computer assisted detection. for mammography.
Mm-hmm.
And so what it's been, and it's been considered a failure, and here's why. So, and I think it has an incentive problem. I think so. In order to make sure that the radiologists still look at the picture, right? Because they still want to make sure that the radiologists can catch other things that might be going on
Yeah.
besides a tumor, right? What they did was, um, if you're a radiologist and you use this CAD software, right, to help you, I think it localizes areas of interest for tumors on mammography. And if you use it, they pay you extra, like Medicare reimburse you extra.
Okay.
I think this is in the US. And the problem was you're supposed to look at the image first, and you're supposed to use the CAD as a double check. And obviously, the radiologist came in, they just go, boop, and they just click that button. And they just look at the areas that are indicated by the AI, and they're like, okay, good. And they save them time, and they make more money.
Right.
So, and that's why it's been a failure. Is that like literally, I don't think it improved outcomes.
Yeah.
And it just ended up costing more money.
Right.
And I think that comes down to the problem of you still need a radiologist to make sure, right? And it comes back to that thing we talked about with the self-driving cars, where if you had this feature, it costed you, let's say $2,000 extra on your car, and you still have to keep your eye out,
Yeah.
right? While you're using this feature, you're just like,
why the fuck am I using this?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And so I think we're seeing a common pattern here is regardless of the industry, the advancements in AI comes from a few prerequisites. One is the cost benefit. Is it cost efficient even to make these advancements, right? And two is what is the value being given to users, right? Does this actually make your life easier? Does it replace a common function in your day-to-day, or is it something that assists with it? And so I think we can kind of extrapolate that to different fields and maybe predict where advancements will come from in terms of AI in those fields. Before we jump into the whole hypothetical golden age of AI, let's talk about another field where AI is prevalently used but not often talked about. And we can talk about the implications of this, which is social media apps and filters. You know what I'm talking about? So most filters you see on Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, they use AI, right, to detect your face or some part of your face in real time and apply matrix transformations to it to generate a filter, right? Like big eyes, puppy dog eyes, like the like glasses superimposed on top of your eyes, whatever, like a hat, like all that kind of stuff. Super popular, right? Used in today. I think so many people use it without realizing that the technology behind it is in fact AI. And so makes sense, right? How it got here. It's social media apps are popular. You give them filters, they're more likely to post stories. Engagement drives up overall. Blah blah blah. All good, right? Maybe you can even charge for premium filters. Low cost, low consequences. Generates easy revenue, like increases engagement. Okay, great stuff, right? Totally makes sense. So let's talk about what this technology implies, right? We have this technology that can alter your face in real time quite accurately, right? So I think you know where this is heading towards, right? There's these things called deepfakes that's starting to gain notoriety. It's been around for a while, but the technology is getting better and better, right? The most common application is superimposing somebody's face on top of someone else's body, and whatever face that was there before, like whatever facial features they were making, if they were talking, we can essentially map that to a different person's face and generate a very realistic video of someone that appears to be saying something that's not really them, right? So obvious implications of these is when if you create a fake video for some kind of controversy or conspiracy, like for example, you can record yourself saying some really outlandish racist things, for example, and then put the president's face on there, and it could become viral. Like people could easily believe that, right? I think people have been wary about Photoshop for a while because it's been around for so long, but people haven't really come to the around to the idea that videos can also be easily manipulated these days, you know? So I think here's an example of AI that has a low cost, like has high cost benefit. It's very easy to implement because the technology is actually has been there for a while, and it does have value to the people using it, right? It creates narratives. It you know, like it stirs up controversy. You can literally generate a fake narrative of your choosing, but the implication is it can be potentially very negative for society, right? So here's something where there's potential for a lot of misuse, um, and in fact, it's probably already being used that way. So what do you think?
Yeah, I'm actually not aware of any controversies
Hmm.
that have been already created from deep fake
So I
video.
wouldn't say there's anything like really big, notorious, but I'm more thinking about the implications. Like it would be like the example I gave, right? Like obviously that's pretty far fetched. I think you could easily disprove like the president didn't say something at this time. But it could be someone, not as important in stature as the president. Uh, in fact, it could be a low hanging fruit. It could be like plenty of times there's celebrities in the media that gets targeted for like tweeting a certain thing or saying a certain thing caught on camera, right? And people say, "Oh my god, like I can't believe, like cancel this person," right? Cancel culture, and then among that fuss, among that frenzy, it could be very simple for someone to upload a video that's a deepfake of them saying something that supports that narrative, and I guarantee you, like not very many people will fact check that, and it could very easily turn viral and be used as part of the momentum against that person.
Yeah, okay, I can see where you're getting at. So what I was thinking in my mind was that I'm sure there are actually algorithms that are able to detect these things because, like you mentioned, these are done
From what
through
I
like
understand, this is like kind of
matrix
like a
transformation.
cat and mouse situation where the deepfake algorithm improves to beat the detection algorithm, and the detection algorithm catches up, and then so on and so on. You know what I mean? So, um,
Yeah, that makes sense. Because this does remind me of, um, so I think this was before filters and stuff. I don't remember when filters came out, but I think in 2014, this like really big paper came out about
mhm.
um, artwork style transformation. Have you heard of it?
Artwork style transformation.
Yeah, so basically, you know how Starry Night, like Van Gogh Starry Night, has a certain look to it, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was basically able to
Ah,
uh, make that into a filter, and
right,
then
right.
take a picture of something else, and then they make it look like Starry Night, but it's in Starry Night's style, but it still has the original buildings and
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, and you had like probably like a Jackson Pollock filter, right?
Yeah.
Like a
Okay,
vac.
and maybe not Jackson Pollock filter because that has literally no fucking no. uh, Van Gogh, I think makes more sense. Jackson Pollock, no matter what you take, it just becomes like
it's
random ass
act- you think it's a filter? It's just like a static image that it overlays on top of anything you feed it.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
oh my
yeah.
god, like premium filter.
But that's kind of where I think the technology for filters came from, and I could be wrong.
Hmm. It's the same technology, same concept. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was a landmark paper that introduced this concept. And then I think a year later or a couple years later, they were creating like they were making generative models able to generate fake images, right?
Hmm.
And generate fake like they're able to generate fake faces now. It's not even a filter,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like they just fucking straight up generate a face.
That's right. Yeah.
And I remember reading this paper at one point. This is like 5 years ago or something, where they showed you an image and it looked just like a normal image, but the AI was able to detect that was fake, and it was because they had like some really weird characteristic problems,
Mm.
right? And another aspect of that paper was saying how like you can generate these images that look like something to you, but the moment you feed it into an AI, it can't recognize shit
Mm.
because of some weird like I don't know whatever like filter or transformation it did to the image,
Mm-hmm.
where it just made it completely senseless to an AI, and it, like basically you can reverse engineer these things.
Right, right.
So what I was thinking was, yeah, like you probably be able to detect these, but I think I get your point, which is that yes, so if you're a YouTube, right, you'd probably be able to catch these,
Mm-hmm.
right? But if you're just passing this along in like email threads or like in some other in
Email
some other
threads,
platform
really dating ourselves with the email thread reference. It,
well, I'm just thinking which platforms don't care, right? But I guess
yeah.
you if maybe Parler doesn't care, right? Let's say,
Mm-hmm.
and and then yes, you'd be able to inflame people through a deep fake video, right? I think you're totally right about that, and I think that's going to be. It's so interesting that hasn't been a thing. Like the only application I can think of for deepfake right now is porn. Like
Yeah,
that's the
that's
only
another aspect. You're right. Yeah, porn is definitely
right.
another thing, and there could be some negative implications there too. Is like you could have someone's real face out there being put onto a different body, and people pass that around as like, oh, this celebrity leaked sex tape, whatever. When in fact it's not even them. So that's also definitely a possible downside.
Yeah, yeah. And so societal effects of this, I'm just surprised this hasn't been a bigger scandal yet. Like I'm just surprised that
True.
nothing will just come out of this yet, to be honest.
I guess maybe it's still not as mainstream of a technology. Like it's not so easy to do on your own, right? Like it's not something
Is
you
it
can.
though? I feel like this would be super easy to do. I'm pretty sure there's like an AP, like someone has made
Hmm.
some kind of
It
like
probably is pretty easy to do, but like not on your like you would have to at least be interested in AI and like do some of your own research. It's not like you can download an app. Actually, you might be able to download an app and
yeah,
do.
I was gonna say like I'm pretty sure you can just download
You
the
might
app
be
to
able
do
to
it.
download an app and do this.
I'm pretty sure you can just download the software and then just literally like upload. It will say like number of videos or images of like the
Mm,
person that you want, like of the face that you want, and then upload like the video of the body that you want, right?
yeah, you might be
Like
right.
I'm pretty sure that's doable.
Yeah, I think that's true. That's
So that's
interesting.
why I was surprised that hasn't become a bigger problem
Yeah,
yet.
you're right. You're right. Because I definitely think it can be a huge potential problem, but you're right. It hasn't really been an issue. Or maybe it has and we don't even know. Like maybe we've been passing around deepfakes and we don't even know they're fake, Like
Yeah, or this could be happening in like a community that we're not part of,
true,
right?
true.
If you're a community that really hates a certain person, and then that community someone generates a video like this of that
Hmm.
person and passes it around, it might never make it mainstream, but all the people who are in that community might believe it.
Yep, you're right.
And similarly, we might be in a community that's similarly like that, right? Like I don't know which videos I've
In
seen on
fact, if anything, that would be the most effective way to use deepfakes is do it in a subtle way that reinforces your existing beliefs. Like you won't even question it, right? Like you won't even go out of your way to research because you just, oh yeah, it totally makes sense that person said that. Whereas if you make like someone like the president say something super controversial, people are gonna be like, huh? Did he really say he wants to kill black people? Like, let me double check that.
Right, right. Like you don't want to gain a level of notoriety enough such that it can be debunked by someone.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. You want it to be like enough to stir the pot to achieve your goal, but not enough where people are gonna like deep dive and point out the holes. I guess that's
But
interesting.
at the same time, they say that like misinformation, like even once it's been disproven, right? Like
Mm.
it still leaves a residual.
Yeah, that's true. And maybe that's the fact. Like, yeah, like give that example of like if you get deepfake of Joe Biden saying something super fucked up and controversial, you could disprove it, but then there's still gonna be people who read the original article and they'll never even hear about the second part, right? It's like in their mind already, you know. Oh,
That's and another is I think it's even if it's proven false, it plants a seed subconsciously,
interesting.
right?
So even if you know, like, oh, I heard this thing was fake, it's still gonna be affected by what you heard initially.
I think so. I think it's going to create an
Mm.
anchor. I think it's always going to leave a level of doubt. It's going to be something that you think about.
No, that's kind of
Um,
scary, isn't it?
yeah, like you might what I say? You might constantly say like, "Oh, that's not true," right? But um, it already creates an impression. So, for example, let's say um, let's say vaccines are rolling out, right? And let's suppose maybe we shouldn't talk about vaccines. Let's talk about something else. Man, like I can't even think of another thing, but let's
I
just go
mean,
vaccines.
just go with vaccines. You know, why not?
Yeah, okay. Let's say vaccines come out, and let's say there's a vaccine X that's made, right? And a fake report comes out saying that like that says vaccine X causes. Be careful here. Let me think. Have to choose something that's not close enough to reality. Can't even
Not
think
an
of
A
anything.
word.
And here's the problem, right? Is that the vaccine causes autism thing is like even though we know it's false, it still leaves the impression that when we think about vaccines, there's an association. So
Hmm.
in the counterfactual, in the alternative universe, right? When you think of vaccines, you wouldn't think of autism at all, and you wouldn't even need to disprove that vaccine causes autism, right? But now in this, because it's talked about, now you might get a scenario where people want vaccines to be tested, right, for whether or not it causes autism, even though there was no established relationship at the beginning anyways. Do you kind of understand what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
So even though it's been disproven, now it leaves a trace, and now we kind of, when we make new vaccines, right, people are kind of worried,
Like
and
the
you
side
have to
effects.
test it.
Yeah,
Yeah, you have
yeah.
to test it for whether or not it causes autism, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um.
You don't want to
So
be that one vaccine that actually causes autism. You don't want to be in the papers like so and so vaccine actually causes autism. Bracket not clickbait.
yeah. So the whole deepfake thing, yeah. Now that you bring it up, I'm just surprised it hasn't become much more of a problem than it currently has.
Yeah, that's interesting. So maybe okay because one somewhat easy solution would be for popular like big social media platforms to implement some kind of detection tool like for deepfakes, right? And just automatically ban the content because those are the platforms where these things are most likely to be able to spread virally. And
Right.
so just removing that point of entry will greatly reduce these. So it's possible that these things actually are implemented already. Like I think Google, especially YouTube, invests a lot of money into this kind of stuff, right? Like making sure automatic detection of foul stuff in videos because it's just much more cost efficient than having people manually look at newly uploaded videos, right? So it's entirely possible they have something like this already.
Yeah, but I guess yeah, if you were in the conspiracy theory world, right, where people may not trust like mainstream sources and stuff, yeah, you might be able to just inject something in there
You're
and
right.
just.
You're right. You could probably. I doubt 4chan's running any video, processing software. So yeah, very easy to. Actually, I don't even think they can host videos. So you put it on like Imager or something, and I'm sure they don't do any. Yeah. So
Damn,
yeah,
this
you're
is
right.
making me more worried now.
It is. I feel like it's something that I've been keeping in the back of my mind to be wary about. But like you're right, we don't really hear about it being a problem yet in mainstream media. So.
Yeah, maybe it comes down to that like cost effectiveness, like you can't get it onto the big platforms.
Mm-hmm.
If you're spreading among, let's say, you know, small groups, you're not really getting that much bang for your buck, and chances are the people there already believe other things.
That's
If you just
true.
say it without having to, post a video, if you just say someone's
You're right though.
really
Everything I've seen from the past few years kind of tells me that people will believe what they want to believe, and it doesn't take that much effort to convince someone of something. Actually, this is a really funny story. So, you know how GME blew up big on Wall Street Bets on Reddit, right? And Wall Street Bets in particular gained so many new subscribers, right? So a lot of their posts are getting crazy amount of upvotes, right? It's not uncommon to see over 10,000 upvotes on a post. So I have a friend who I won't reveal the identity of. He actually made one of those DD posts on Wall Street Bets about GME, like very very long, well researched, right? At least on the surface, like he used he used his Tableau to provide like graphs to for his analyses. He got over 30,000 upvotes on this post, right? Um, I can assure you, this person in real life is not a financial expert whatsoever, and he in fact purposely put something false in the post just to see if anyone called him out, and only one person actually brought it up. So it goes to show you, like it actually takes a lot less effort than you think to appear to have a. I mean, he did put a time and effort into it, but like people won't question. People really won't go out of their way to double check something if they already have an interest in it, I think.
Right. And so in that sense, I guess going back to our kind of rule of thumb for like, whether or not AI works, right? If an AI tool works, is that in this case, there's just no point. Like
Yeah, it's like the value added is not that high because we can already fool these suckers without going through this hassle. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. I think that's a good point to end on deepfakes. Or I guess I want to touch on like this technology is not only like doesn't only have negative potential uses. I mean, I think one obviously like filters, like social media filters, are pretty relatively harmless and they're pretty fun. And I think one potential good like beneficial use case of this is in terms of like media. I'm thinking like film and movies and shows, like being able to CGI someone else's face for a scene can help. Like I'm thinking of like cases where an actor died during filming, right? And you have to finish the movie, or you have an actor who, like, you're playing a role like where the storyline maybe like he should be younger than like if you were playing a flashback scene, you don't have to get a different actor. You can have the same actor but with a younger version of his face, and it can add to the legitimacy of the whole like feeling of the film, so to speak, right? Like that's like some potential cool use cases.
Yeah, and so this reminds me of something really stupid, which was
I love hearing stupid things.
or kind of funny to me at least. So it was like, that style transfer paper I talked to you about,
Yeah.
and you just talked about how that can be used to create like movies, for example, right? So around that same time, this movie came out called Loving Vincent, and it's about Vincent Van Gogh, and it's basically a movie uh, that's like kind of like a live action, but basically CGI to make it look like Van Gogh paintings,
Okay.
right? In that style. And I think I read that like this took a really long time to make. It cost a lot of money because all the animation, and like I was just like, wait, this paper would have made this so easy to do, right? Like
Oh no.
I read this paper,
If
like
only they waited a few
yeah,
years.
exactly.
That's funny.
So I think you're right. I think that is a really good application of it. That deepfake doesn't necessarily have to be bad, right? If done with consent, it can be good.
Yeah.
This also reminds me of so Amir recommended this like Chinese reality TV show to me at one point, and I watched a few episodes of it, and it was about some lawyers, right? Like some intern lawyers, right?
Okay.
And they were trying to like win a position at this firm, whatever. And one
Oh,
of
I
the
think my
cases,
parents actually watched this show. Yeah, it's like a
oh yeah,
competition thing, right?
yeah, and then like I watched this while like I was like incapacitated after my surgery, but um, what was it? Well, one of the cases they got was like how this man spent a shit ton of money on this woman, on this female streamer, right? And it's because he thought that she was like, this young, beautiful woman. And like in China, I think the filter's like off the charts. And so like, so basically her filter broke during one live stream,
Oh no.
and it revealed that she was like a middle-aged woman, and he sued her for damages, saying that it was like basically fraud, right? He paid this money to her, thinking that she was, this, that she basically misrepresented herself.
Right.
And like, yeah, this reminds me of that lawsuit, right?
Did
Like,
he
so
did he win?
I don't know, but like, I think it does make an interesting, does ask an interesting question, right? Like using filters to change what you look like, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And if it was like a live streaming thing where,
Yeah, sorry, go on. I have another
yeah,
point
where
I'll
you're gaining
finish.
fans.
Gaining
Yeah,
fame,
yeah,
yeah, because you're essentially monetizing your appearance, right? In that sense, so it can be construed as false advertising, I guess. Yeah,
mm-hmm.
that's super interesting. Like on a slightly related note, there was this article I read about like a while back about how this Chinese man married a Korean woman, right? And she was really gorgeous, really pretty, but then their kids turned out super ugly. So he like investigated into it, and it turns out like she had plastic surgery, and he found like her original photos, and she was like just completely different. And so he sued her ass based on that because he like didn't know what she looked like beforehand, and he won actually. He won that lawsuit. Um,
Wait,
so
was this the that like meme picture thing with like the female celebrity? Because that one
uh,
was a hoax, but this might be
was
a
it a
different one.
celebrity? The one I read, I don't think she was a celebrity. I think she was just like
Oh,
a
okay, I
random
think this is
person.
gonna be different.
But I mean, show me the picture because I mean, yeah, maybe it was a hoax for all I know because I did not, I did not do my research into it. But it was an article that I read a few years back. Um, but yeah, like I thought that just kind of reminded me of that. And like in a way, like this is kind of like digital plastic surgery, right? Um, yeah, so that's super interesting.
And in a world where we spend more and more of our time digitally, right? Like over Zoom and stuff,
Hmm.
yeah, this is going to become more and more of a thing.
Yeah, have you heard of VTubers?
Yeah, we kind of talked about this for a sec, but just a sec before that, just talking about Zoom, right? I just
Yeah,
had an idea, like you can cheat on exams like this,
you can.
right? Like if you had an exam that was proctored over Zoom, right?
Oh,
You could,
yeah, you can. I mean, have you seen those? Like people, you can set up your own custom video background, right? So people will set up like
right?
a loop of a video of them, like like looking like they're concentrating when you can just step away and people will know.
Dude, this is genius.
So, I mean, exams over Zoom, you're already asking like that's already a shit show, I think. So,
That's true. That's true. But like job interviews, let's say, right?
true, true. Yeah, there's some potential value for sure.
You got someone
I
else answer for
imagine.
you.
I mean,
That's a
like
lot.
for big tech companies, like they love using proprietary software, so probably not gonna be Zoom. But yeah, I can see that being better. I'm sure a lot of companies would just default to Zoom or, yeah, probably Zoom these days.
Yeah, I mean, you can probably hack your own webcam, right? Such that you just feed
True.
the feed, right? You basically disable the camera function, you just feed the feed directly.
Yeah, you're right. That's an option. Yeah, a lot of potential there, and we don't even need to use deepfakes. Just do your own custom video loop.
Yeah,
I
true,
think.
true.
Do you remember Ocean's 11? They used that little trick at one point to make it look like the vault was like not being broken into.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, so it's a trick that's been around.
And then someone caught on that there was like a loop because something like
Yeah,
jerked
something
or
like
something.
slightly flickered. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Any last thoughts on AI, on deepfake? I think I'm out.
Yeah,
I
no, I'm
okay.
out too, and I don't even think we necessarily have to discuss the whole like future implications because I think a lot of what we said like directly applies. Like, um, just like I feel like the innovations that we talked about are what's gonna or we're gonna see in the next few years, and like there's this abstract concept of like somewhere far down the line you're gonna have like humanoid cyborgs alongside humans, right? Like, I mean, do you think there's any we could talk about that, but I feel like it's something so far away that anything we discuss is going to be purely like hypothetical, like what we see from like movies and TV.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this was actually my introduction to AIs in a way was at the
Mm-hmm.
beginning I was really interested in like AGI, right? Like artificial general intelligence.
Yeah, yeah.
And like I took this course called Computers and Culture in
Mm-hmm.
university. It was a really great course. And I did my term paper on like super like artificial intelligence. And my professor wanted me to like look into Ray Kurzweil. Like, have you heard of him?
No.
Talking basically about like the singularity.
Mm, okay.
Have you heard about that?
Yeah, yeah.
So basically,
The
like it's
great
sort of like
singularity. It's like the ending of the movie Her, right?
what happened in that?
It's like
Like she.
she met like another AI personality, and she started like talking with him more, and she was like, me and the other AI have decided to go up to like the great beyond and just like only talk to other AIs. So see ya.
uh, in a way, like so basically, I think it's like an extrapolation of Moore's law, right?
Mm.
Where things move exponentially, and it's saying that at some point, it's like a hockey stick, right? It's like, there's that inflection point where things just kind of take off, and it gets to a point where uh, artificial intelligence and technology improves on itself, uh, and so it can start improving on itself so fast, right, that it just like blows away, right?
Okay, okay, yeah,
Singularity
yeah.
in the idea
So
of
I
like,
think
for
yeah.
example, yeah, like in physics, right, where you have the singularity, black hole, right, where you reach an
Right.
asymptote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
So that is kind of what happened in her is like she started outgrowing the humans basically and left them behind along the other AI.
yeah, so like I think whenever someone gets into AI and they hear about it, like, oh my God, like it's so crazy, like, oh my God, this is gonna happen, right?
It's a very
And
yeah,
it's like a very attractive, very simple
exactly.
idea,
Yeah, very
right?
attractive. It sounds cool to think about.
But in reality, we haven't gotten anywhere close to that, and
Mm-hmm.
that's because we're not really capable of creating an artificial general intelligence
No,
yet.
no,
And
not even close.
I don't know if we could ever really. Like, we might be able to at one point, but like the way that our intelligence is created, right? If you believe in evolution, it was basically through trial and error, right?
Mm-hmm.
And evolution acting,
And that's
right? Like,
how that's how we're training AI is basically trial and error, right? We're just basically feeding them a shit ton of raw data and telling them like this is A, this is B.
yeah, but the problem there is that we have to do the labeling, right?
Yeah.
So in this case,
Like the
it's
AI
more
needs to self label.
supervised.
Yeah.
Well, like, so the AI we're training mostly it's supervised learning, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when humans evolved, that was more unsupervised learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem, is that having to try to label everything in the universe for the AI to learn, right? For to create an AGI just seems so difficult,
It's
right?
a very daunting concept like to grasp.
Like there is that concept of like the genetic algorithms, right? Where you basically just set a like a some type of loss function, right?
Mm-hmm.
In our case, in evolution, the loss function was essentially like evolutionary fitness, right? Which is made up of like the components of survival and reproduction, right? That was basically our loss function. That's basically loss function in like physical evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And some people were talking about how like if we really want to create an AGI, we probably have to do something similar with AI. We have to create like a genetic algorithm where we have to define a certain loss function. But you can see the problem with that, right? Like what loss function are we going to determine for the AI to follow? If we determine the survival thing, this thing can get really out of hand, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it will start consuming all resources, right, to the detriment of like everything around it and everything like that. And also you'd have to basically unleash it into the physical world. You have to expose it to the laws of physics beyond just digital world in which it inhabits, right? For this loss function to really work, for survival to really work, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone's comfortable with doing that, right? No one's comfortable with giving an AI trial and error ability to unleash into the real world with physical capabilities, right? With like arms and engines and stuff. That's scary shit, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
that's when AI is gonna do some really stupid shit. And
Well, I think at the very least you would bootstrap the AI with some initial knowledge, right? I would imagine.
yeah, I guess you
Like
could.
you wouldn't unleash like a newborn baby AI into the world. You would unleash like a at least a teenage AI who has some basic like he should know like oh like humans do not mess with them. You know like there should be some basic rules that he's following.
Yeah, but
It's
if we
following.
allow, yeah, but the problem is if we allow, like I guess the whole thing is if we allow mutations in the code, right, which is
Mm-hmm.
essentially how this would have to work, how the
Mm-hmm.
genetic algorithm works. The problem is that the mutations might it's so unpredictable. It might override its prior learning
You're right.
anyways.
You're right. Yeah. And so I think like to unleash something like that into the world in the first place, there must be fail safes. There must be like shutdown mechanisms. There must be um, probably core principles that cannot be overwritten. I would imagine. I don't know if that defeats the entire purpose of this concept, but I'm sure that will be the case. If and when
Yeah,
we get to this point.
yeah. I just don't think. I feel like at no point will we ever become comfortable with doing this.
I think in our lifetime we won't be, but it's hey, who knows? You know, like as time elapses, like societal values and how we see things change, and so in a few years we're gonna be considered the boomers with our outdated ideas, you know, and like kids are gonna be advocating for like uh, yeah, like I want my kids to deep fake their way through through life and yeah, who knows, we'll see.
They'll be like, "Oh yeah, I'm part of PTI, like people for the ethical treatment of artificial
Of
intelligence."
yeah, yeah. Stick up for robot rights, right?
Yeah.
LGBTQA or
Yeah,
B
like
B for binary. Wait, no, never mind, because non-binary is already a term, so
yeah, you can't really have binary and non-binary. Oh, well, you could.
or maybe binary will just refer to AI instead of the traditional male female, you know? Maybe that'll just be called normie by then, who knows?
Yeah, like that's like so when I think about it, right? Like the fact that our intelligence took so long of trial and error to create, and that it operated in this really harsh environment of um like natural selection,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like if we were to build AI the same way that we were created, like that's kind of how you would do it, right? But I don't think it's going to be any faster than our evolution,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like you could bootstrap it with certain things at the beginning, but it's just so unpredictable that I don't think I would do that.
yeah, yeah.
And then so the other way to go about it really is kind of like to train it on what we know, right? On human
Mm-hmm.
knowledge. But then putting that together into something that works, I don't think that's something we know how to do yet. And maybe it's something we'll learn how to do.
I feel like a lot of times people have this idea that you can bootstrap knowledge for the AI by plugging it into the internet and it'll just learn from like parsing the web, the internet. Um,
Yeah, I think the problem is that you need a loss function, right? You
yeah,
need to define a loss function for this to really work. And if you're just doing unsupervised learning, there's no loss function. So what is it actually learning? I don't think it's learning any. Like what is even that model?
yeah. That's the thing is it sounds like neat conceptually, but I think it's very difficult to pull off. I think we're pretty far away from being able to achieve that too. Now, I don't know if quantum computing has an impact on this. Um, I don't know if you know like the concept behind quantum computing, but the idea is it'll be capable of making decisions not based on strictly ones and zero bits, but based on
Qubits.
qubits. Yeah.
Which frankly I don't even understand. So like
I don't
here's the
really
thing.
understand it. It
I think I should try to learn it because here's what happened the last time there was a technology where I was like, oh, this is too hard to understand, so I didn't spend time to it. That was Bitcoin. That
Bitcoin.
was blockchain, right? Fucking mistake that was not to learn that early on. Because I own Bitcoin, right? And I was like, yeah,
even
I don't really understand what this fucking thing
even if
is.
you understood it, I don't know if you could have predicted how much it would grow.
I think that like the people who are really into it were talking about like smart contracts and stuff for a long time now.
Oh, I
Right? Like I
see.
think smart contract was coined like more than 3 years ago. And uh, some I think some of the major concepts, the technology may have not developed right away, but I think some of the major concepts were defined right from the start. So if you had taken the time to learn it, maybe you could have understood.
That's fair.
Um, yeah, so I feel like that's something that I should probably learn about quantum computing too, because like I know the general gist of it, which is that yeah, rather than operating on zeros and ones, you operate on qubit, which is like kind of like Schrodinger's cat. It's like both a zero and a one before it's resolved, right?
Yes,
And
yes.
then it's like I don't know how that improves computing power, but okay. Like I don't know what kind of
Like
algorithm goes into.
theoretically, the concept is like you're capable of uh, computing not just like your base processing to the power of two, but like to the power of I forget the exact number, but like the idea is if you're able to take advantage of that from the code perspective, then
So sorry, do you then is that like base three then 0, 1, and then a question
yeah,
mark?
I don't think it's strictly base three though. That's the part I was hesitant about. But yeah,
Okay.
it basically opens like another branch, right, of
And
possibility.
isn't the problem that when you like it works on entanglement, right? So when you examine a different part of it,
It can
isn't it
change. The
gonna
value can change, right, based on when you examine
doesn't
it,
it
basically.
then solidify the value of the other, right? Of whatever like qubit it's entangled with?
I'm gonna stop talking because I'm sure whatever I say next is gonna be wrong. So
Yeah, I have no fucking clue. This shit is
yeah,
like
but I think
next
that roughly
level.
the conceptual benefits is like more processing power, like to the exponential scale, right? And the problem is we have like the way we program is based on that binary like setup. So like you would need a new programming language to take advantage of quantum processing.
And I've heard that like physically it's been really difficult because
Mm-hmm.
to keep it in like this I don't even know what to call it, the quantum state. I don't know. Like to keep it in whatever state it needs to be kept in. Like apparently like it's super cumbersome to like uh physically construct this thing.
Yeah, yeah. I think we're not quite there yet. It's more a proof of concept right now.
Yeah, like one
Yeah.
interesting thing I heard about was that like potentially the computing power will make it so that it can crack the encryption that we use for blockchains right now.
Right, right.
So one thing I heard was that like if quantum computing becomes a thing, the entire block like crypto just kind of dies. Although I guess you could probably create a
I think you could
encryption
use
protocol
quantum.
on yeah,
Yeah,
qubits, yeah.
on qubits. Yeah, exactly.
But then that would mean that you'd have to have uh like almost ubiquitous quantum computing used too, right? Because the
Yeah,
whole thing about crypto is that it has to be decentralized.
yeah.
So I think that's the problem.
It would also mean the end of all coins that came before that because, like the ledger your ledger is based on like older encryption. You can't just switch it midway. I'm pretty sure, right? Like, and even if you could, everything up to that point is not secure. So it would have to mean some new coins would have to like take over. I think.
Yeah, well, I guess if the miners have the entire history of previous ledgers on
Oh,
their
you're
nodes
saying
or
they can transfer it over to the new coin, like Bitcoin
yeah,
2.0,
it would just be a fork of it, I think.
like a Bitcoin. Yeah, that's possible actually. Yeah,
Yeah, because I
you're right.
think the ledgers are stored decentrally, right? Like so all you need to do
Yeah,
is
but I'm
get
saying like up to the point where you fork,
yeah.
it's all encrypted using like an outdated algorithm, right?
But I think it doesn't matter or
I'm actually not sure. Yeah, it might not matter.
yeah, I'm not sure either. Like this shit is
I don't
like
think we'll get to worry about this for quite a while either. Yeah,
yeah, it
because
this is outside of my
I think
expertise.
quantum also has the same. You know, it comes back to the principles we established is the cost benefit and the potential value, and it's they're not quite there yet.
Yeah, definitely. Like they're definitely not there yet, but at some point, possibly.
Yeah, yeah.
And I would say that using quantum computing to try to create an AGI, I still think it does. Like the problem is still the same. I don't think the problem with creating AGI was ever processing power, right?
That's fair.
The problem has always been a design problem. Like as
Hmm.
in what way do you design this? Like how do you design the loss function, right? And quantum computing just doesn't help with that at all.
True, true. You're right. Yeah, I think it's gonna take some probably some new minds in the field like think differently about the way we would go about doing this before we see any advancements here.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, too bad. Like honestly, I was like super stoked about like AGI and stuff back in the day, and the more I learned about it, and I told you it's like a series of things, right? Of like, oh yeah, this doesn't quite seem as easy, and then
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, everyone who's working on this is working on ads, and it just really kind of like discourages you away from the whole field. But
Yeah. So
I mean, lucrative.
something that's I think more cool conceptually than how it's being used currently, and it all relates back to like the potential value, right? The basically the opportunity cost of investing in AI, right? And it's like what can you get out of this? And so I
Yeah, and
think no, go ahead.
sorry, I was just gonna say one thing I think we haven't really touched on is like the hype around AI, right?
Yeah.
And it comes back to that cost benefit analysis. I think for a lot of people, they're making a false, uh, like the wrong calculation because in their mind, the benefit is magnified by all the hype, right? They
Yeah.
don't actually understand what the benefit is, and I've seen this firsthand, right?
Yeah.
I've seen researchers pay a lot of money, right, to use AI and not be able to get anything out of it because from a first principles foundation, if you understood what AI can do, if you understand how the algorithms work, you would know right from the beginning it was not going to give you anything.
Mm-hmm.
But they didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And with a shiny new toy, they're willing to fork out so much money.
Yeah. I think you're right. Yeah, and that's going to be another factor in the advancement of AI in different fields. But yeah, I think we pretty much touched on all the major like relevance uses of AI today and in the near future. Um, I don't think.
wouldn't say that. We're probably not that, prescient and
All right, fair enough. All the ones
we did
that
the best we could. I think we did a good job. We, explored a lot of different
all the
things.
ones that are relevant to us, and that's really what's important is only the things that they're directly relevant to us, right? Like who cares about anything else? So
Fair enough.
yeah, on that note, I'm pretty much out of things to say. What about you?
Yeah, no, that was a good discussion.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely brought up some things that I hadn't think about,
Yeah,
hadn't thought
same here.
about. Like learning about how, the background of how Alexa works. And, I didn't know that technology was there for the intent analysis thing. And also,
Yeah, we're actually pretty good
okay,
in terms of being able to recognize like what you're trying to say actually. And by we, I mean the world is the technology is actually pretty solid.
Yeah, I just want to say rest in peace for all the mechanical Turks out there who are labeling these data. Like, you guys are building the future of the world,
Did you
one
know through the
time.
Alexa app you can click through and become a volunteer labeler?
Fuck that, man.
That's one of the
Like,
other
like,
mechanisms.
1 cent per label.
No, it's completely free. Why would we pay you for that shit? But yeah, that's pretty much it for this episode, I think. Thanks for anybody tuning in to listen. Next time, I think we're gonna talk about. Actually, I don't remember. What was the topic that we said?
Oh, we can talk about anything. Do you have anything in mind?
I thought we had something that we brought up, but
Okay, the thing we had brought up was crypto.
that's right. Yeah. So I'm down to talk about crypto. Maybe by then I'll have something in my portfolio on crypto, and I can divulge
How much
my positions.
today is Coinbase's direct
IPO.
listing, right?
Yeah. Did you get in on that?
No,
I'm gonna
I
stop
learned.
recording. By the way, that's the end of the episode. See you guys.
All right, peace.